from last week's Last Dance. Did Isaiah Thomas pay too steep a price for one questionable decision? And the D in Big D stands for draft. No one did better than Dallas. Does this mean the Cowboys are suddenly the beast of the East? Those are the questions. We've got the answers as we get up with you, starting right now from Bristol on a Tuesday. Mike Greenberg here, and to Scott Van Pelt. And the question about the pants, all I can say is this: wouldn't you like to know? Let's get up and go on a very busy sports morning. Here we go. The NBA has pushed back its plan by a week to reopen some team facilities for voluntary individual workouts. Players will now not be allowed to re-enter facilities before May 8th. They will still only be allowed to open in states that have loosened stay-at-home orders. To the NFL, Field Yates reporting that the Texans have picked up quarterback Deshaun Watson's fifth-year option for the 2021 season. The team have engaged in only very preliminary discussions with Watson about a long-term extension as of Friday, that according to our Ed Werder. Meanwhile, a story in the Sports Business Journal yesterday discusses some of the possible schedule changes the NFL is considering for next season. One scenario would include delaying the season by 5 weeks, eliminating byes, and playing the Super Bowl in late February. An NFL spokesperson told us at ESPN, quote, "We're not going to comment on hypotheticals or any potential scenarios. We're planning to play the 2020 NFL season as scheduled, and our decisions will continue to be led by the latest advice from medical and public health officials, as well as current and future government regulations. We continue to plan for the season and will be prepared to make adjustments as necessary." All right, our top story this morning. The Green Bay Packers continue to be the center of attention coming off the draft, where they traded up to take Utah State quarterback Jordan Love, 26 overall. It's the first time in the common draft era that Green Bay traded up in the first round to take a quarterback. How all that would impact Aaron Rodgers was a big topic of conversation. Then with their second round pick, they took a running back, A.J. Dillon, out of Boston College. He's Green Bay's highest drafted running back since Eddie Lacy in 2013. And they never did draft a wide receiver. Despite 36 wideouts being drafted this weekend, that's a new record. The Packers didn't take any. Listen to what Tony Kornheiser thinks should happen now.
I think Aaron Rodgers ought to consider asking for a trade. That's how much I think this is a ridiculous pick on their part. Aaron Rodgers does not have around him what Mahomes does, what Breeze does, what even Garoppolo does. Every year they don't draft anybody to help Aaron Rodgers, and they say, "You're so great, go out there and turn water into wine." And pretty much all the time he does that. This could not happen on any other team in the league because other teams have owners. And you would have to go to the owner and say, "We're thinking of trading up to get a quarterback." And the owner would say, "What? What are you, nuts? Get out of here."
That's what Tony says. The Packers have never drafted a first-round receiver during Rodgers' tenure, meaning of his career 364 touchdowns. Only one of them was thrown to a receiver drafted in the first round, and that was a tight end, Mercedes Lewis. That is the fewest of any quarterback with 200 or more career touchdowns in history, according to Elias. All right, look who's with us this morning. We have got Ryan Clark, Dan Graziano, and Dominique Foxworth ready to go. And Dan Graziano, our insider, I want to start with you because I hear what Tony is saying, and we all understand the frustration. But a quick look at Aaron Rodgers' contract situation suggests a trade is just not on the list of options.
Yeah, pretty much impossible, Greeny, at this point. If they were to trade him now, very hypothetically, it's more than $51 million in dead money on this year's salary cap. It would actually add $29 million to this year's cap. They don't have that cap room to even do it if they wanted to. Even if they trade him next year, you're looking at more than $31 million in dead money. A trade of Aaron Rodgers out of Green Bay is pretty much impossible this year and would be extremely painful for the team next year. If you were to do it this time next year, you'd have to be sure that Rodgers was done and or Jordan Love was absolutely ready to go and be a star in the NFL in 2021. So, yeah, asking for a trade is very far-fetched and quite frankly, kind of an insane overreaction. I mean, Aaron Rodgers has been there since 2005. He's played in 4 NFC championship games. Like the notion that the Packers are not consistently putting Aaron Rodgers in a position to win and succeed and win championships just isn't supported by the facts.
Okay, that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it are all of the stats about all the receivers they haven't gotten them in the no first-round picks and all the rest of that. And you wonder if a quarterback of his stature, one championship might be deemed an organizational underachievement. That's one way to look at it. You can go either way. Ryan Clark, let me come to you on this. Because let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Rodgers is really unhappy with what they've done. But we've just described that he can't get traded in the next 2 years, realistically speaking. So now what happens?
It's time for him to put on his happy face. It's time for him to be the face of the franchise. And actually, it's time for him to prove all of us wrong, to show that he can be the mentor that Brett Favre never was, to show that this guy we see sometimes in post-game press conferences who's a little disgruntled, a little uninspiring, can be a guy that inspires, can be a guy that takes a glass that could be half empty and makes it full to the brim, because that's the type of talent that Aaron Rodgers has. And so your hope is he learned from his experience. Your hope is that he understands the perception of who he is, just a player, and that he comes into the building and works, and that he shows this organization, because he does seem like the guy that can hold a grudge. We hear about him holding a grudge from his draft, that he's a guy that says, you know what, you don't want to get me my players, you don't want to help me out, you want to replace me, I'm going to make it impossible for you to do that. He has that talent, now he has to have that will, and I'm looking forward to seeing Aaron Rodgers go back to the old bad man he used to be.
It's fascinating to me, Neek, because I understand the aging quarterback and the all-time great, like a guy like Rodgers clearly is, saying, look, mentoring a young guy is not part of my job description. That's not what I've signed on for here. I've signed on to try and win a championship. So does it make him, for lack of a better word, does it make him a bad guy if he doesn't feel like that should be part of what he's dealing with right now?
I don't think it does, but I think the perception, whether it makes him a bad guy or not, the perception will be part of your responsibility as an aging quarterback is to be kind and decent to someone coming in. I think you don't have to spend all your time mentoring them, but you should be supportive of any of your teammates. But I do agree that I agree with most people that I didn't like the Jordan Love selection. But the more I think about it, I understand the rationale behind it, because it's not like Aaron Rodgers was great last year. He was pretty average or below average as a quarterback. So maybe it's time to move on, and having Jordan Love, once they move on from Aaron Rodgers in probably 2 years, having him as a cost control quarterback for 3 years, assuming he pans out pretty well, like that kind of makes sense as a move if you don't think that Aaron Rodgers can go back to being the Aaron Rodgers that he was 4 or 5 years ago.
Listen, it's all well and good for it to make sense for the organization, but RC, I'll come back to you again on this. Yes, to be kind and decent towards Jordan Love is reasonable. We should be kind and decent to everybody. But if I'm Aaron Rodgers, I'm thinking to myself, I'm trying to win a championship here. I'm not worried about what we're going to be doing in 3 years. And I don't blame him if that's the way he feels right now.
No, oh no, absolutely, 100%. I'm not saying he has to be great to Matt LaFleur. I'm not saying that he has to be great to the GM that's decided to plan for the future and not the present. We're just talking about inside that quarterback room. But I'm willing to bet that Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers had a conversation about this, and I can't see that conversation going well. But he has to come in, play, because he knows the heat will be on him this year for his production and his behavior.
All right, we'll see. Again, this is probably the most watchable situation in the NFL coming out of the draft this weekend, and we have much more on it as we continue. Meanwhile, one of the most talked about moments from episodes 3 and 4 of Last Dance on Sunday night clearly was that moment when the Pistons walked off the court without shaking hands after the 91 Eastern Conference Finals when they were swept by the Bulls. Isaiah Thomas, the Hall of Fame point guard, joined us live yesterday here on Get Up and talks about how he feels now about all that has happened since.
Had we had the opportunity to do it all over again, I think all of us would make a different decision. Now, me, myself personally, I've paid a heavy price, and I thought I should have made that dream team. I wasn't a part of it. That hurt me. And looking back, if I'm not a part of the dream team because a lapse in emotion in terms of not shaking someone's hand, if that's the reason why I didn't make the dream team, then I am more disappointed today than I was back then when I wasn't selected.
Jay Williams is with us this morning. Jay, Will, it was a fascinating discussion that we had, Jalen and I, with Isaiah yesterday. And then Isaiah was on First Take right after us. So he had a lot to say yesterday. What was your reaction to all the stuff with Isaiah yesterday?
Well, obviously, did his stats deem him being on the 92 Dream Team? 1,000%. He belonged in that team, and I felt for him. Isaiah's always been like a big brother to me, but at the same time, it was a byproduct of the style in which they played, and it just wasn't the Jordan, Scottie Pippen not shaking their hand, Greeny. I think it was a series of events that occurred throughout Zeke's career. It was their relationship that they had with the Boston Celtics, which was, a crazy rival. Larry Bird was on that dream team. And I go back to a book that I read in 2009, and it's a great book that provides context on the Last Dance to understand the relationship between Michael Jordan and Zeke. Was called When the Game Was Ours. It was written by Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and Jackie McMullen, our own. And it talks about Larry Bird's relationship with Zeke on a dream team. And it also really comes out and states by Magic Johnson that, Magic felt some type of way. They had such a strong bond. They were like brothers. And, there were rumors that were spreaded supposedly that were told to Magic Johnson by Lon Rosen, his agent, that Isaiah was talking about his bisexuality, spreading rumors about his bisexuality back in the day. There was issues with the HIV about letting him play. And so there are all these different things. And Magic also said in this book that he was one of the ones that kind of drew a line and didn't want Isaiah to play in the dream team as well. So you had Magic, you had Larry, you had Michael, and you had Scotty. You had four of these powerful entities that all didn't feel comfortable with Isaiah playing on a 92 Dream Team. So it's very complex and it's very deep. And I feel for him, but it is where it is.
Does it feel to you as though they have moved past that stuff? I mean, the relationships involved in here well. It felt to me like Isaiah yesterday was saying, I thought we had buried a lot of that stuff. And so for Michael to say the stuff he says now, again, I don't mean to put words in Isaiah's mouth, but this was very strongly the feeling I got, that I thought that we were all kind of good on that stuff now, and this made me feel like we really aren't. What is your sense of that?
Well, I know between Magic and Zeke, I got a chance to watch that interview on NBA TV, and it was incredible. You felt like they came to a conclusion about what they had experienced in their life. But I will say this, I don't know the relationship between MJ and Zeke Greeny, but I do know there have been players that I've been able to mend my relationships with moving forward in my life. But when you ask me and sit down with me in an interview and ask me to revisit my emotions that I had as a player, even though we came to terms, I'm still in that particular moment. I still remember that player and the sensation that player gave me with my feelings around that time. And I think I respect Michael for being real with his emotions during that time. That hatch may be buried now, but it doesn't mean that when he revisits that emotion that he needs to articulate it that way that he feels now. He's going to articulate it the way he felt back then. And that's the real raw emotion that we get in The Last Dance.
It's fascinating to me if you think about the relationship between those two guys. I mean, immortals, all-time greats. It starts with Isaiah freezing Michael out of an all-star game when Michael is a rookie. And for all intents and purposes, it ends with the Pistons walking off the floor and not shaking hands with the Bulls. The drama of all the things that happened in between, remarkable. Jay Will, have a great day. Good to see you, my man. We got lots to do as we get rolling on Get Up this morning. Coming up, the Cowboys have all the parts to be an explosive offense this year. You'll hear why the rest of the NFC East needs to be afraid. And if there is a college football season, one of my friends here says we will have a unique opportunity to make a huge change. You'll hear what that is as we get rolling. It's Get Up.